In the same week that we found out about the granting of a licence for a large salmon farm in Bantry Bay, Argentina effectively banned the practice due to its serious environmental implications. The Bantry Bay Salmon Farm is the latest in several recent aquaculture projects which locals are deeply concerned about. Minister, will you conduct a review of salmon farming and its impact on biodiversity, ecology and industries which are dependent on the local environment, such as fishing and marine tourism? Minister, so many times in West Cork, community groups have had to raise huge sums of money and devote huge amount of time to seek judicial reviews, to write questionable decisions about this in relation to the environment. We can't ask them to do that again.
Minister to reply.
Thanks, Deputy Cairns, for your question. All applications for aquaculture licences for the cultivation of salmon are considered in accordance with an extensive suite of national and of EU legislation, including the 1997 Fisheries Amendment Act, the 1933 Foreshore Act, the EU Birds and Habitats Directives, and the Consolidated Environmental Impact Assessment Directives of 2014 as well. This suite of legislation provides for stringent consideration and consultation in relation to the environmental and ecological impacts of the proposed activity, as well as extensive consultation opportunities with both the public and statutory bodies in relation to all aspects of the application, including tourism. All applications for salmon farm licences must be accompanied by a detailed environmental impact assessment report. This report forms a key element then of the deliberative process and is fully assessed by my department's scientific and technical advisors. The reports are furthermore subject then to scrutiny and assessment by a significant number of prescribed statutory consultees. The environmental impact assessment then, Las Concorla, and application form are also made available to the public as part of the public consultation process. The statutory consultees include Board Fáilte Ireland, whose role it is to support the long-term sustainable growth, obviously, of our economic, social and cultural and environmental contributions with regard to its contribution to tourism in the country. And the views of the Board are indeed, and indeed all statutory consultees, then together with the views of the public as submitted as part of the public consultation process, are taken fully into account in arriving at a determination in respect of the aquaculture application. The consideration of the impacts on local ecology and tourism constitute a very important element of my department's consideration of any application for an aquaculture licence, and rightly so as well. But it is a very comprehensive and detailed assessment.
Thank you, Minister.
Deputy Cairns.
Thank you.
And where there's very significant public consultation.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Cairns.
Along the route.
1 minute.
The granting of the salmon farm licence is against the wishes of a substantial number of local groups, including community organisations, fishing communities, the marine tourism. So you referenced tourism there, but it's difficult to understand how this could ever benefit marine tourism. Campaigners, state agencies and businesses have repeatedly raised concerns about the impact of such an industrial farm. We all know that sea lice from salmon farms can have a significant and detrimental impact on sea trout and wild salmon. We also know that officials in your department have identified issues with the company involved, including overstocking farms and harvesting higher numbers of fish than permitted under the licence. Also, one of your predecessors, Minister Creed, discounted its licence for one of their farms in Kerry. I know what you're saying about reports and all of that stuff, but you and I both know the reality of salmon farming and what other countries are doing. It's really hard to understand why we're going in this direction. So I'm wondering what you as Minister can do for communities like West Cork who are deeply concerned and worried about the economic and environmental impact of this salmon farm.
Thank you, Deputy.
Groups whose only hope seems to be an expensive judicial review.
Deputy.
And like I said, we've had to do that so many times.
Minister.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Cairns. Listen, I think it is really important that every aspect of an application is taken into account, and really importantly as part of that, the ecological and environmental impact of it, and that's fully assessed. And the application process and the assessment process is very, very rigorous in relation to that. And it goes through it in great detail, and as I pointed out, the list of consultees that make their submissions is very extensive, and the legislation which has to be complied with and which any application has to be benchmarked against is very, very comprehensive as well. So all of those issues are considered. I believe our aquaculture sector and our salmon farming sector is one which delivers very significantly for our local economy, which can be done on a very sustainable basis, and which we can continue to develop on a sustainable basis as well. Obviously, any application has to be rigorously assessed. It has to meet all the tests, and it does. And different people and may have different views. That's why the public consultation process is there. That's also why the public consultees are involved, so that they can feed into that. And then a fair assessment and a rigorous assessment made of all submissions before a final decision. And it only will be approved if it meets all the required standards and tests.
Deputy Cairns, 1 minute.
Local concern about Bantry Bay is only one case from West Cork. There was a very strong campaign to oppose an oyster farm application in Clonakilty Bay, a special area of conservation. Also groups in Kinsale are objecting to a planned mussel farm, an application around which there is confusion due to an error which took place regarding initial public notice for the aquaculture licence. I would really appreciate it, Minister, if you could look into this to see, has the community left feeling unclear and disenfranchised. And I hear what you're saying about the system, but these issues are systematic of a dysfunctional licensing system. In 2017, review recommended a complete reform of the system. I know that you have to read out those things and come in and say them, that there is this system in place, but the system is leaving itself open to legal action and intervention from European authorities. This, as well as over 20 salmon farms currently operating with expired licences and without environmental impact assessments, haven't been carried out. So, Minister, I understand what you're saying, and I know that you have to say those things, but what are you doing to reform the system more broadly, because we know it can't go on like this. We know the system is dysfunctional. We know that this particular business are operating without licences, without environmental impact statements.
Thank you, Deputy.
And continuing to get licences at the expense of fishing communities and the environment and tourism in the area.
Minister to reply.
Deputy Cairns, it's not a matter of me having to say anything. I mean, these systems weren't dreamt up. These were put together after very rigorous engagement and in full compliance with all European and national laws, particularly around environmental law and habitats and ecological requirements as well. So that's a very comprehensive and rigorous assessment. And there is a very robust system in place. Now, there have been significant.
Why would there be that?
The report in 2017, Deputy Cairns, had been very significantly about the delays and the backlogs that had developed up to that point. And that has been worked through now, and we're having a situation where licences are being dealt with in timely fashion. But I think it's important to have a balanced approach to this, because when you are outlining, those that are opposed to salmon farming and to oyster farms, for example, there's many in your constituency as well as others who are also very much in favour of it, and it can contribute and does contribute very positively towards the economy and in terms of producing very sustainable, healthy food as well. So we have to look at it in a balanced way, and that's why a comprehensive and detailed licensing system is really important in terms of reaching fair and equitable and reasonable decisions on it as well.
Thank you. The next TD.